the corporate share has been rising. And so if you look at the GDP data, which run from 1994 until today, the corporate sector share of the economy has grown by about 6 percentage points. The household share of the economy has fallen by about 6 percentage points. So this is another critical factor in understanding why consumption is falling in Japan, because consumers, households, are getting a lower share of income. They're getting a smaller share of the pie than they were historically. So looking forward from here, the critical question about whether consumption in Japan can ever grow again is really whether the household sector can start to get a bigger share of the economic pie once again. And there's 3 things here to be thinking about. The first is the wage component. So that is what I talked about earlier in terms of that employee compensation figure, how much companies are spending on wages at an aggregate level. Now, actually, if you look at the official data says yes. And this is again, it's a well-known sort of way that economists look at the economy. It's called the labor share. What's the wage share of the economy? Now, when you look at that in Japan on a headline basis, it actually looks quite stable. So where in other economies, the labor share has been falling because companies become more powerful, in Japan on a headline basis, it doesn't look like there's been much change. However, one thing to realize in Japan is that over the course of the last 30 years or so, there's been a big fall in self-employment. And the pay for people who are working on their own or for small entrepreneurs, that's not captured in the labor share of the economy. It's captured in other ways. Economists call it mixed income in general. It's where the income comes into the economy, and it's unclear whether it's going to the capitalists or it's going to labor. So it's called mixed income instead. Now, if we look into that and we incorporate that as kind of the labor share as well, then we start to see a much more clear pattern where over the course of the last 30 years or so, the labor share has been generally shrinking, but labor is getting a smaller share of the economy than they were previously. Now, that's clear on a general basis. The Bank of Japan looks at a quarterly data set which tracks this, and that actually suggests that the labor share has fallen particularly quickly since COVID. So both in terms of a structural perspective and also in terms of a cyclical perspective, households are getting a smaller share of the economy than they were before. And obviously for people who know about Japan and particularly know about markets in Japan, this wouldn't be a surprise because everybody is familiar with the fact that profits as a percentage of GDP are record high levels in Japan. And it's not quite the same. It's not quite an apple for apples comparison, but still, in that scenario, it would look like companies getting a bigger share of the pie, laborers are getting a smaller share of the pie, and that's been a problem for the economy.